By the time the bus wheezed away and left me standing at the edge of the gravel drive, the mountain air had already numbed my fingers through my gloves, and I was beginning to suspect something was very, very wrong. Because the lodge on Hollow Ridge, the sprawling cedar and stone structure that Daniel had hyped up for months as organized chaos, 10 cousins, 3 dogs, everyone yelling over board games, was dark except for a single window on the second floor. No cars in the circular drive. No sound but the wind threading through the pines and knocking a loose shutter against the siding like slow applause. And if you've ever walked toward a house expecting warmth and gotten nothing but cold and silence, you know exactly how my stomach felt as I hauled my suitcase up the steps, pies balanced in one arm, the doormat stiff with frost under my boots. I tried the bell first, out of habit, because I still believed someone was going to fling the door open and yell my name, but only a dull buzz sounded inside, so I fished out the key Daniel had pressed into my palm 3 days ago with a crooked smile. Just in case you get here before us, city buses are unpredictable. And let myself in, stepping into a foyer that felt more like a museum than a home. Antler chandelier looming overhead, family portraits marching up the staircase, the air faintly scented with lemon cleaner instead of roasting turkey or cinnamon or anything that hinted a holiday was about to happen here. I shut the door behind me, and the sound echoed, too loud, swallowed slowly by the emptiness of the house. And that was when I noticed the sheet of heavy cream paper propped dead center on the console table beneath the mirror. My name on the front in Daniel's quick, slanted print, Area. And my heart did something ugly in my chest, but I opened it anyway. Because there's this stubborn part of you that still hopes it's going to say something kind, something reasonable, something that makes this weird. Quiet makes sense, only this is what it actually said. Change of plans. Mom booked a last-minute villa in Santorini for Thanksgiving week. Flights were crazy, but we made it. Consider it a family mental health intervention. We all really needed it. You'll stay at the lodge and look after Leon. You know how he gets. He needs help with meds and the stairs. You're so good with this stuff, and honestly, it'll mean the world to Mom if we know he's not alone. We'll be back Sunday. We'll talk then. D. And the way he'd squeezed. You're so good with this stuff in there like a compliment was almost funny if my throat hadn't been closing up. Because in one neat paragraph, he'd turned me from girlfriend meeting the family for Thanksgiving into free live-in caregiver for a man I'd met once at a noisy brunch, and the fact that he hadn't said a word about this on the phone last night when he'd told me he couldn't wait to see me up here made that line, "We'll talk then," feel less like a promise and more like a threat disguised as postponement. I was still staring at the note when a cough rasped down the hallway, followed by a dry voice that sounded like it had been soaked in bourbon and old winter air. Let me guess, he left the part about the villa until he was out of punching range. And that jolted me enough to spin around, heart slamming against my ribs, to see an old man in a wheelchair in the doorway to what looked like a library. Thin blanket over his legs, plaid shirt buttoned all the way up, white hair slicked back with too much effort for someone who supposedly didn't know what day it was most of the time, if you believe Daniel's description. The man's gaze flicked from the paper in my hand to my face, sharp gray eyes missing nothing, and he huffed out a humorless little chuckle, rolling forward with one practiced push on the rims of his chair. "You must be Arya," he said. "Grandson's charity case, or was it soulmate? Hard to keep up with his vocabulary." "You're Leon," I managed, because my brain was still trying to adjust from crowded family holiday to "You're alone in an empty house in the middle of nowhere with a man these people have clearly decided is a burden." And his mouth quirked up on one side. "Last time I checked," he said. "Didn't expect them to get quite this bold, I'll admit, leaving the new girl as my babysitter while they run off to drink wine on a cliff. That's a new level of performance." "He said you needed help," I said, the words tasting stupid as soon as they left my mouth. But I needed to say them because that sentence had been the hook they hung the whole thing on. "Oh, I do," Leon said. "Just not quite in the way they told you." He held out a liver-spotted hand. Come on, bring the note. The foyer's good for dramatic exits, not conversations. I found myself following him down the corridor, wheels squeaking softly on the hardwood, past framed photos of ski trips and lake summers, and a younger Leon standing behind a grill with a spatula like a scepter, all of which made the hollow quiet of the house even weirder. The library was warm, at least. Gas fire humming behind glass, shelves groaning with hard covers, a leather armchair pulled close to the hearth, and I put my pies on a low table and my suitcase by the door because my body needed to do something, while my brain tried to make sense of being abandoned with someone else's grandfather. Leon waited until I sat on the edge of the armchair before nodding at the paper still clutched in my hand. Read it out loud, he said. Humor an old man. I did, and the words somehow sounded worse in the air than they had in my head, especially, you'll stay at the lodge and look after Leon, like I was a piece of furniture being arranged, and when I finished, Leon snorted. He didn't mention Santorini when he dragged you up here, did he? He said he'd meet me here tonight, I said. He sent his mom's Pinterest board for a long table in front of the big windows. He made a big deal of me finally seeing the place. Leon said. Daniel makes a big deal out of whatever he needs in the moment. Attention, sympathy, other people's money. He shifted, wincing, and gestured vaguely toward the hall. Kitchen's a crime scene, by the way. Cynthia told the housekeeper to take the week off because we were keeping things simple this year. Translation. She wanted to save money after booking the flights. I didn't even have to check the kitchen to believe him, but I went anyway because I needed a minute away from his watchful eyes. And sure enough, the fridge held half a carton of milk, turning that worrying shade that meant it was about to revolt. A heel of hard cheese, 2 shriveled apples, and a box of baking soda that looked older than me. The freezer was better only in the sense that there were things in it. Frostburn leftover, a bag of ice fused into 1 block, and an unlabeled container I'd only open if I was incredibly brave or incredibly desperate, which, give it 2 days, I might be. The pantry was stocked with dry goods and nothing resembling a holiday. Definitely no turkey. Definitely no sign that anyone had planned to be here cooking with me. Laughing in the doorway while Leon told stories from the old days, the scenario Daniel had painted over and over, until I'd almost been able to smell it through the phone. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I yanked it out like a reflex. It was a notification from Instagram, not a text, and I nearly dropped the thing when I saw the preview. A Daniel.Anders tagged you in a post. The photo was of Daniel on a rooftop terrace somewhere bathed in Mediterranean light. Lean arms tanned already, wine glass in hand, his mother Cynthia in oversized sunglasses, his younger sister Kira waving in the background. And next to him, their heads tilted together in that annoying candid way, was a woman I recognized from his stories about this client who always emails last minute, a willowy brunette named Sienna in a linen dress, her hand resting on his chest, like she'd earned the right to be there. The caption was a mess of emojis and hashtags, but the first line was what stuck. Grateful for second chances and family healing in Santorini, my chosen family, finally breathing. And the fact that he tagged me in it was almost worse than if he hadn't. Like, he genuinely thought I'd look at this and think, wow, good for them. And not you, lied to my face and used my holiday to make yourself look like a good son on the internet while you left me as unpaid hospice staff. Ah, Leon said from the doorway, having rolled after me without my noticing. There she is. Who? I asked, even though my thumb was already hovering over Sienna's profile. The new chapter, he said. He's been rehearsing lines about her for weeks, asking if the house was too full to bring extra guests, making a big show of not wanting to overwhelm me, like it was my fault he wanted to impress someone. I see they solved that little crowding problem by evicting everyone with responsibility. I swallowed around the burning in my throat. He didn't tell me he was inviting anyone, I said, and my voice sounded wrong in my own ears, thin and far away. He emptied my savings last week to cover some unexpected bills, and then he sends me this, and... I cut myself off. but Leon's eyes narrowed. Your savings, he repeated. How much? 6,000, I said, because once you start bleeding, there's no point pretending it isn't happening. It was my buffer. Rent, studio expenses. He said his car needed work, and his mom's insurance had a gap, and I felt like an asshole for asking questions about timing, so I didn't. And now he's in Greece, Leon said. On a villa, if I know Cynthia. Extra bedrooms, private chef, pool. No one swims in because it would ruin their hair. All paid for by money they definitely did not earn with honest work. He has a job, I said weakly, even though I'd started to suspect most of his job consisted of talking about how hard his job was. He sells software. He travels all the time. On whose dime? Leon asked, one eyebrow up. Let me show you something, city girl, since you've been promoted from girlfriend to collateral damage. Back in the library, he had me pull down a photo from the mantel, a candid shot of him 3 years younger, sitting at the head of a crowded table, Cynthia leaning over his shoulder, refilling his glass, Daniel laughing with Kira, everyone looking like an ad for warm, slightly obnoxious wealth. You see this? Leon tapped the edge of the frame. Last time the table was full, back when I still believed they saw me as more than an ATM with arthritis. That was the year I signed the first transfer, because Daniel came to me with tears in his eyes about how crushing his student loans were, and Cynthia cried about how she'd sacrificed a career to raise him. I paid them off. That's what you do, right? You help. The year after, it was the investment in his startup. Then Cynthia needed bridge funds because the spa she'd bought into was in a rough patch, and somehow the rough patch never ended while the bags kept showing up in her closet. By the time I started keeping proper track, I'd donated more to their lifestyles than I'd ever spent on my own kids. He nodded at the built-in cabinets beneath the shelves. Bottom left, second from the right, there's a false back on the drawer. Tug hard. I found the drawer, fingers stiff with cold and anger, and yanked. A thin panel popped loose, revealing a slim metal lockbox underneath. Leon handed me a tiny brass key from a leather cord around his neck. Inside was not cash, not jewelry, but a stack of folders and a small black recorder. The folders were labeled in Leon's precise, neat hand. Transfers, medical, incidents, passwords, and the little care he'd taken to write each in straight letters said more than any speech could have. I was a bookkeeper for 40 years, he said. Different numbers, same rules. People lie. Ledgers don't. When I realized my accounts were draining faster than my body was failing, I started treating this house like an audit. You can flip through later. The important part is this. I've been waiting for something that would make even a lazy judge sit up and say, that's too far. Flying across the world and leaving me with an empty fridge and a stranger to manage my pills qualifies nicely. A stranger they assumed wouldn't think twice, I said, pressing my thumb against the transfers tab. Someone who'd be grateful just to be here. And are you? Leon asked. Grateful? I looked at the ruined holiday, the cold house, the man in front of me who had more fight in him than the whole family he'd raised, and felt something hard click into place behind my ribs. No, I said. I'm furious. Leon smiled, slow and sharp. Good, he said. You'll need that. I can't push a vacuum anymore, but I can push paper, and I can still sign my own damn name. They think they know which way the inheritance wind is blowing. They built entire sandcastles of debt on that assumption. Maybe it's time we adjust the forecast. The rest of the day blurred into this strange, focused rhythm. I made soup from the scraps in the pantry and the few things I'd brought with me, because apparently I'd come more prepared to feed myself than 3 adults had to feed the person they'd left behind. And while the broth simmered, Leon spread papers across the library desk, explaining in clipped phrases how Cynthia had quietly transferred the title of her yoga studio into the same LLC as the lodge, how Daniel had taken out a line of credit against the property for emergency renovations, and then spent it on a Tesla and trips he called client visits, how he'd watched it all and finally, 6 months ago, quietly moved most of what was left of his liquid assets into a separate trust they didn't know existed. There were emails from doctors recommending round-the-clock help that had been rescheduled until the appointments disappeared off the books. There were pharmacy printouts showing prescriptions filled and never picked up, or picked up and never administered. There was a note, written in Cynthia's looping script and pinned to the side of the fridge, that said, "Cut his night meds to half. He's groggy and it scares Kira," with a scribbled heart next to it like that made it kind. "They call it doing our best with what we have," Leon said, tapping that note. "What they have is my money, my house, and a remarkable lack of shame. What I have is time, which is short, and evidence, which is abundant." I told him about my drained account, the way Daniel had pivoted from, "I love that you're independent," to, "Maybe we should combine finances so it's easier," after I'd had a couple of good months at the studio. The slow isolation I'd chalked up to growing up, when really it had been, "He doesn't like how loud my friends are about my worth." Leon listened in the quiet, fire popping occasionally like a punctuation mark, and when I finished, he nodded like a puzzle piece had clicked somewhere I couldn't see. "He didn't just leave you," Leon said. "He invested you. Different kind of theft. One they tell themselves is love because it feels less ugly. You deserve to decide whether you're going to let them write you off as a sunk cost." After dinner, he insisted we call someone, and I watched his knobby fingers dial from memory. "Rowan?" he said when a voice picked up. "It's Leon. Time's up." Rowan turned out to be a woman, maybe in her 40s with a streak of silver in her dark hair and a voice like someone who'd been disappointed by people professionally for years and turned it into fuel. She was an elder law attorney in the nearest city, and within 20 minutes on speakerphone she had a list of instructions for us. Locate his current will, top drawer, safe. Code is the year he married Cynthia. Tear it up in front of him if he really wanted to make that statement. He did, with relish. Draft a new one with very specific language about neglect and financial exploitation. Assign a new healthcare proxy. Unless you want the woman who skipped a hospice consult to decide when to pull the plug, she said dryly, and prepare to document everything about this weekend in a way that would survive in court. "They'll claim you're manipulating him," Rowan warned. "They'll say you turned him against them. The antidote is documentation and third-party witnesses. Leon, we're going to get you scheduled for a mental capacity evaluation when I come up tomorrow. Arya, I need you to start a log. Timestamp everything. Calls not returned. Photos of the fridge, the thermostat, the pill bottles. I know it feels monstrous, but if they're going to paint you as the vulture, we need to show that they've been picking his bones clean for years." "I don't want to spend what time I have left thinking about court," Leon said when we hung up, staring into the flames. "I wanted quiet, books, a last snowstorm, Martha's old records. They took that from you the minute they turned you into a ledger line," I said. "The least we can do is make sure they don't get to profit from it." "Listen to you," he said. "Thought you were just the girl with the shy smile in that photo Daniel showed me. She does little murals," he said, like that was cute. I should have guessed his minimizing meant you were dangerous. "I do big murals, actually," I said, more out of habit than ego. "Whole walls." "Good," Leon said, "because we're painting them a very large, very unpleasant picture." The storm moved in overnight, snow hissing against the windows, wind dragging its fingers down the chimney. The lodge felt both smaller and more sealed off in the morning. The world beyond the pines erased in white. Leon woke coughing hard enough that I hovered in the doorway, wondering whether to call an ambulance, but the look he shot me when I suggested it was pure steel. "They'll bring me back here," he said between breaths. "Hook me up, bill my insurance, and then hand me back to the same people. Unless you'd like to politely inform my son he has to cut his vacation short and meet us at County General." "No? Then we stick to the plan. Regina's due at 10. Regina was the hospice nurse who'd been checking in occasionally, according to Cynthia, and shoved into the schedule when the agency could manage it, according to Regina. She showed up early, shaking snow off her cap. Lines of fatigue cut deep into her face, and when she heard where the family was, she closed her eyes for a long, slow second, like she was counting to 10. "I'll say this much," she murmured as she checked Leon's lungs, frowning at the crackles under her stethoscope. "At least they have the sense to leave him with someone who gives a damn." "They left me with a note," I said. "No med schedule, no emergency plan. The house is barely stocked." "Of course it is," she said. "Why make care easy when you can make it someone else's problem? I'll document this visit. If anyone asks, I'll tell them exactly when I was here and exactly who wasn't." When she left, the house felt even quieter. The snow outside muting every sound but the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hall. I made notes like Rowan had told us. 9:13 a.m. Regina arrives. Confirms lungs worse. Family still unreachable. 10:02 a.m. Call to Daniel goes to voicemail again. Left message, decline and need to discuss. 10:05 a.m. Screenshot of his new story walking through some whitewashed alley with Sienna. Caption, "Lost in Paradise." Posted 3 minutes after my call. The ugliness of it was so on the nose it almost felt fake, like a cautionary tale someone had written to warn women like me and then decided to dramatize for effect. But this was my phone, my account, my drained bank balance, my reflection in the microwave door looking back at me with that shell-shocked tilt. "You okay?" Leon asked from the doorway, wheels tracking in a faint line of snowmelt where he'd rolled to watch me pace through the kitchen. "I feel stupid," I said, for not seeing it, for defending him to my friends when they said he talked over me, for smiling at his mother while she called me sweet, like a pet. "You feel human," Leon said. "It's not a crime. Being conned by people you love doesn't make you stupid. It makes them predators. But you're here now. That's what matters." "Feels a little like I'm here because I'm easy to use," I muttered. "They miscalculated," Leon said. "They thought they were leaving a doormat. They left a witness." Rowan arrived that afternoon, driving up in a battered Subaru that looked out of place in the fancy drive, her boots leaving clean prints on the marble as she walked in, shaking her head at the chill of the foyer. She sat with Leon for an hour, asked him a series of questions, calm and clinical, dates, names, current events, a few math problems he solved faster than I could, and when they were done, she nodded, satisfied. "If anyone tries to claim diminished capacity, they're going to have a hard time," she said. "He's sharper than half my clients under 50. By evening, the new documents were drafted and signed. Will, trust, healthcare proxy, letters to the bank and the investment advisor. Leon insisted on leaving specific bequests to Kira. She's still salvageable. And even set aside something small for Regina's overstretched hospice organization. But the bulk of the assets he'd managed to tuck away from Cynthia's reach went into a trust with my name on it, and a clause I argued about for 30 minutes before he overruled me. For Aria, in recognition of the care she provided when my family chose not to. "I can't take this," I said. "You barely know me." "I know enough," he replied. "I know who opened the door when I yelled last week." Hint. It wasn't my son. I know who gave me the right doses of the meds the doctor prescribed instead of having them to save money because they made me sleepy. I know who showed up when the weather turned. Money is all I have left that means anything to these people. I'd rather put it where it contradicts their story. He dictated a video too, at Rowan's suggestion, his voice steady as he spoke to the camera about his life, his choices, the way love had slowly been replaced by obligation on one side and resentment on the other. He didn't raise his voice once, didn't say hate or disown or any of the dramatic words you hear in movies. He just described, in careful detail, the pattern of being treated as a chore that got in the way of other people's self-actualization. When he said my name, I had to look away, because there was a softness there that hurt. In 4 days, This girl has shown me more tenderness and more anger on my behalf than my own blood has in 4 years, he said. If fairness still means anything in this world, let it mean that. The snow kept falling. Leon kept failing. Sunday morning, he couldn't catch his breath long enough to curse about it, which scared me more than the gray tinge around his lips. Regina came back, listened again, and this time she didn't sugarcoat it. If he were in the hospital, they'd be talking hours or days, she said quietly in the hall. I can call them, but you know what that means. Machines, strangers, and the same people who left now showing up to cry by his bed for the photo op. I thought of Daniel's tagged stories, Cynthia's curated grief, Kira's big eyes watching everything, and I shook my head. He doesn't want that, I said. Then keep doing what you're doing, Regina said. Keep him comfortable. If they wanted different, they should have answered the phone. Leon stayed awake long enough to give me one last instruction. Bottom shelf, behind the blue box, he murmured, voice thin. Bottle of Scotch Martha bought me for our 30th. I was saving it for something important. Feels like this qualifies. I found the bottle, dust thick on the glass, poured us each an inch in short tumblers, and sat by his bed while the storm pressed against the windows and the house creaked quietly around us. To bad investments, finally paying off, he said, lifting his glass with a shaky hand. To terrible men inspiring better decisions, I said. To you walking out of here with more than you came in with, he added, eyes glinting, even if it's just a backbone in a story. He drifted not long after that, breaths growing shallower, even as the wind outside howled louder, and sometime near dawn his hand loosened in mine and didn't tighten again. There was no drama, no last-minute confessions, just a quiet leaving that made the whole house feel suddenly heavier and lighter at the same time. Regina came, because she'd told me to call no matter the hour, and handled the official things with a gentleness I will never forget. The men from the funeral home were respectful in a way that made Cynthia's performative care look like what it was. When they left and I was alone, really alone, for the first time since I'd stumbled in with my pies and my big, stupid hope, I went to work. The video went in the player in the living room. Paused on the first frame, the folders lined up on the dining table like exhibits, each labeled clearly. Rowena's documents sat in a neat stack, copies of the new will and trust rubber-banded separately, a note on top reminding me not to let anyone walk off with the originals. I took photos of everything, uploaded them to a cloud folder she could access, printed out a few key pieces, bank statements, the notes Cynthia had left about cutting his meds, screenshots of Daniel's posts juxtaposed with timestamps of my unanswered calls, and laid them in a second line. This weekend, in big letters written on scrap paper, because if you're going to confront people who specialize in rewriting history, you might as well make it idiot-proof. I left Leon's note for them on the coffee table, the one Rowan had had him write in his own hand, the ink a little shaky but the words clear. To Cynthia, Daniel, and Kira, if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and you were not here when it happened. I know why. Now so will everyone else. And then I waited. The storm had cleared by the time their rental SUV crunched up the drive Monday afternoon, sky a brittle blue, snow piled in bright drifts, the world looking fresh and sharp in a way that felt almost offensive. I heard doors slam, laughter, the clatter of rolling luggage on stone, Cynthia's voice floating in ahead of her perfume as the front door burst open. "Dad," she called, sunglasses still on, scarf artfully loose. "We're back. You won't believe." She stopped when she saw me standing in the living room archway, hands tucked into the sleeves of my black sweater to stop them from shaking. Daniel came in behind her, skin darker from the sun, hair a little longer, Sienna at his shoulder with a canvas tote, and the wary look of someone who'd heard a lot about this place, and none of it included me being here unsupervised. Kira hovered in the background, eyes flicking from my face to the empty wheelchair by the fireplace, like she already knew, on some level, what was coming. "Where is he?" Cynthia demanded. "Is he napping? You look like a ghost, Arya, honestly. We told you not to worry so much. These things are exhausting if you don't pace. He died, I said, because there is no kind way to rip a bandage this big off people who didn't earn that gentleness. Early yesterday morning, he went in his sleep after making sure everything he wanted to say was written down. The shopping bag slid out of Daniel's hand and hit the floor with a soft thud, wine bottles clinking inside. Sienna stepped back like the air had been punched out of the room. Cynthia's face went slack for a heartbeat, then rearranged itself into a performance of outraged grief so fast it almost gave me whiplash. "You let him die alone?" she snapped. "We left you here to look after him, and you what? Just—" "I called," I said. "Regina called. Rowan called. I left 11 voicemails over 3 days. Regina documented every visit. You were online, Cynthia. You posted 17 stories since you boarded the plane. You were not unreachable. You were just elsewhere." Color climbed up her neck, ugly and blotchy. "Don't you dare talk to me like that," she said. "You have no idea what it's like to carry the weight of this family, to be the only one everyone expects to—" "To empty his accounts," I cut in, and her mouth snapped shut. "To decide which meds were worth the side effects. To choose a villa over a hospice consult. You're right. I have no idea what it's like to be that person, and I'd like to keep it that way." Daniel finally found his voice, stepping forward, hand out like he thought he could physically smooth this over. "Arya, okay, let's all take a breath. You've clearly been under a lot of stress. And my dad—" "Leon," I said. "His name is Leon. Not Dad when it's convenient, and the old man when it's not." Leon was confused, Daniel said, the first crack of panic in his tone. "He's been paranoid for months, you know that. He kept talking about us stealing from him. It's just dementia. You can't take anything he wrote seriously. My mom has been his rock through—" "Stop," Kira said quietly, but with enough force that he did, shocked, because his little sister never interrupted him. She was pale under her holiday tan, eyes bright. "Arya texted me a picture of him. He looked bad, Dan. You saw it and you said, 'He always looks like that. He's dramatic.' And then you took another shot with Sienna on the terrace. I saw you." "Kira, you don't understand," he started, reaching for her, but she flinched back. "No," she said. "I understand fine. I just didn't want to see it before." "If you're done accusing each other," I said, "you should read what he wrote." I picked up the letter from the table and held it out. Cynthia snatched it from my hand like she expected it to explode, unfolded it with fingers that shook just enough to betray something real under the outrage, and read. Her face changed as she went, the practiced indignation sinking under a heavier, uglier weight. Leon's description of the nights he'd waited up for them to come home from dinner, and they hadn't. The mornings he'd woken up alone and confused because someone had decided his pills were too expensive to refill. The way he'd heard Daniel on the phone in the hall, calling him dead weight with good credit. The simple statement that hurt more than any insult. The greatest pain of my last years was not my failing body, but the knowledge that my presence in your life felt like an obligation you begrudged rather than a relationship you cherished. When she finished, Cynthia crushed the paper in her fist. "He was sick," she said. "He didn't know what he was saying. This is cruel to shove this in our faces when we just got back from—" "Santorini," I supplied. "He mentions that too. How you told him you couldn't afford full-time help and then booked a last-minute villa anyway." Daniel lunged for the stack of folders on the table like he could physically prevent them from existing. "What is all this?" he demanded. "Did you go through our private financials? This is illegal, Arya. You can't just—" "He went through them," I said. "He compiled them. Bank statements, transfer receipts, doctor's notes, email printouts. I made copies. So did Rowan." "Who the hell is Rowan?" Cynthia snapped. "The attorney he hired 6 months ago," came a voice from the doorway, and there she was, leaning against the frame, coat still on, briefcase in one hand, snow dusting her hair. "Afternoon. I'd say sorry for your loss, but given the circumstances, it might sound like sarcasm. The room went very still. Rowan walked in, set the briefcase on the table like it was a gavel, and snapped it open. "We'll keep this brief," she said. "You have flights to catch, I'm sure." Mr. Leon Anders executed a new will, trust, and healthcare directive on Saturday in my presence, in full capacity and after thorough discussion. 2 independent physicians assessed him last month and last week. Their reports confirm his mental competence. Those documents are now in effect. "He already had a will," Cynthia said, voice thin. "Your firm drafted it. It leaves the lodge and the bulk of the estate to the family. We reviewed it together." "He revoked it," Rowan said, "in writing, with witnesses. Video, actually, should this ever come into question." She pulled out a sheaf of papers, slid them across the table. "The new arrangements place the lodge and certain other assets into a trust controlled by Ms. Arya Cole, with directives for maintenance and eventual sale. Funds are allocated to several elder advocacy organizations and to Kira Anders for education, pending proof that the accounts her grandfather believed existed for that purpose do not in fact exist." Her gaze cut to Daniel, who was suddenly very interested in the scuffed toe of his boot. "What about me?" he demanded, looking up. "I'm his son." "You're mentioned," Rowan said, "by name, in the list of reasons he chose to disinherit you: abandonment during critical illness, financial exploitation, repeated disregard for medical advice, and this weekend's little jaunt, which, if I may say, was phenomenally ill-timed." She nodded toward the big window, where the ridge and the road and the entire world outside looked like a snow globe. "Judges do not look kindly on children who leave their dying parents snowed in with no food while they pose on cliffs for likes." "This is insane," Cynthia said. "You can't just waltz in here and tell us everything we built is—" "Everything you built," Rowan interrupted, "was built on his name, his credit, and his assets. Your yoga studio, owned by the same LLC that holds this property, which he controls in the new trust. The Tesla, bought in cash via a transfer from his account last year, which he documented as a loan you never repaid. The trips, all conveniently coded as caregiver respite in the bank memos. He has receipts for that too. Or rather, he had them. Miss Cole has them now." Cynthia swayed like someone had pulled a rug from under her. Sienna made a faint noise, half guilt, half, "I really shouldn't be here for this," and took a step toward the hall. Daniel grabbed for the papers, his movement jerky. "I'll contest it," he said. "We'll say she manipulated him. She," he jabbed a finger at me, "was alone with him, with his meds, with his accounts. We don't know what she—" "You do know," Kira said, and everyone looked at her because she'd barely said 5 words in a row in front of her mother in years. Tears glittered unshed in her eyes, but her chin was up. "She sent me photos," she said. She called. "You told her she was overreacting. You muted your phone while we were at dinner. You said he'd be fine. Grandpa told me months ago he was changing stuff, that he was tired of paying for our spiritual journeys. You laughed, Dan. You said, 'Let the old man rant. It's not like he can get to the bank himself.'" His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Rowan closed her briefcase with a decisive click. "You can contest," she said. "You're within your rights. You'll lose, and you'll create a public record full of very unflattering details in the process. But if you're committed to that level of self-immolation, who am I to stop you?" She handed me an envelope. "These are your copies," she said. "We'll meet tomorrow to go over logistics. For tonight, I suggest you go pack whatever you brought that you don't want thrown in a donation bin." "She can't stay here," Cynthia said, rounding on me, rage finally overtaking performance. "This is my home, my husband." "Ex-husband," Rowan said. "You divorced 10 years ago. He let you stay because he didn't want to uproot Kira. He could have sold this place out from under you at any moment and didn't. That grace ended when you decided Santorini took priority over morphine consults." Daniel followed me down the hall as I went to get my bag, his voice low and frantic. The the charm stripped away, leaving something raw and petty underneath. "Arya, come on," he said. "You're not seriously going along with this. My dad was angry. He said things he didn't mean. You know how parents get. This is about us, not him. We can fix this. We can get a lawyer of our own. You don't even like the mountains. You hate the cold. You told me you wanted to paint in Barcelona or something. So just sign this stuff back over and we'll..." "Will what?" I asked, turning in the doorway of the guest room I'd never gotten to unpack in. "Go back to our cramped apartment I paid for while you played the tortured son? Pretend you didn't steal my savings and lie to my face about your trip? Let you bang your client in our bed during your next business retreat, as long as you tag me in the photos?" "I didn't," he started, and I laughed, sharp and humorless. "You're really going to lie now?" I asked. "After all this?" "I made a mistake," he said. "Okay?" I panicked. "You've been distant, buried in your work, and Sienna was there, and my mom." "Your mom didn't make you take my money," I said. "She set the example. You chose to follow it." He reached for my hand, and I let him catch my fingers, just long enough to slide the cheap silver ring he'd given me last year off my knuckle and drop it into his palm. "You taught me something valuable, though," I said. "How people can look right at you while they're measuring how much they can get out of you. Leon taught me something better. How to stop being that person." "You think you're better than us now?" he snapped, hurt curdling into spite. "You think sitting with a dying man for 4 days makes you some kind of saint? You're just lucky. You're a stranger who showed up at the right time. He didn't know you. He was angry at us. He used you." "Maybe he did," I said. "Maybe I used him too. I needed a mirror." He held one up. Behind him, down the hall, I could see Kira watching, arms wrapped around herself, Cynthia pacing in the living room, phone pressed to her ear as she already started calling people who might sympathize, who might tell her this was an injustice and not a consequence. "We're done, Daniel," I said. "I'll have Rowan send you whatever the process is for removing my name from the lease. You can keep the apartment. You'll need somewhere to go when this place sells." "You won't get away with this," he said, the last defense of small men everywhere. "I'll make sure everyone knows you took advantage of a sick old man. I'll ruin your name. No one will hire you again." "I paint walls," I said, "not hearts. And if anyone asks why I did what I did, I'll tell them the truth. I came here for Thanksgiving and left with a ghost, a folder full of receipts, and a reminder that my time is worth more than being the soft place bad people land when they need to feel better about themselves." Outside, the air was so clear it almost hurt to breathe. The ridge loomed above the house, trees heavy with snow, the sky that particular hard blue you only get in the mountains after a storm. My suitcase creaked as I dragged it down the steps, every sound distinct in the frozen stillness. The neighbor from across the narrow road, a man in a flannel jacket I'd seen waving at Leon through the window on the first day, was clearing his walkway with a shovel. He paused when he saw me, leaned on the handle. "He go?" he called, voice soft enough to be respectful from a distance. I nodded, throat tight. "Yesterday," I said, peacefully. "Good," he said. He was tired. He talked about you, you know. Said his grandson's girlfriend had more backbone than the rest of them put together. High praise from him. The wind stung my eyes, but that wasn't why they blurred. "Thank you," I said, "for checking on him." "We all did, when we could," he said. Didn't feel right, what they were doing. Guess he finally agreed. He tipped an imaginary hat. "You take care of yourself, Arya." I loaded my bag into the back of the shuttle van Rowan had arranged to pick me up. It turned out she thought of everything, and as we drove down the long, winding road away from the lodge, the house shrinking in the rear view mirror until it was just another dark shape among the trees, I felt the strangest mix of grief and relief and something like defiance settle in my bones. I had come up Hollow Ridge as the girl who said, "It's fine," when it wasn't, who apologized when other people hurt her, who believed that love meant understanding all the reasons someone couldn't show up, and I was leaving with a story written in someone else's hand, but binding on my own. You are not furniture. You are not a free add-on to someone else's drama. You are not the nurse they assign themselves when they've run out of options. You are a person. You get to decide what your time, your care, your anger, your softness are worth. Leon had used the last of his to make sure the people who had taken him for granted felt it. The least I could do, with the second chance he'd shoved into my unwilling hands, was not waste mine.